Hi guys, so this is Narrowly speaking after several times of recording this video. So my basic writing error is comma errors. So I'm just gonna read out the definition that writing analytically has and explain a little bit about it. The comma separates the main independent clause from the dependent elements that modify the clause. That's one of the functions that a comma has. And another function that a comma has is that it separates two main clauses joined by a conjunction, and that is known as a compound sentence. And there's something called a comma sandwich, and what that is basically a sentence that is separated by two commas, and it is because a sentence is separated by an illogical point. Not an illogical point, an illogical statement or idea that doesn't connect entirely with what that sentence is doing. And I'll talk more about that in one of the future slides. So one of the things that I have such a trouble with is that the comma does not signify a pause. So even though you pause while you're reading, it does not mean that you have a comma in your writing, because comma creates how the sentence or the message is being told. And so, to finish reading, the comma says to the reader, here is where the main clause begins or ends, or here is a break in the main clause. In the case of compound sentences containing two or more independent clauses, the comma says, here is where one main clause ends, and after the conjunctions that follow me, another main clause begins. And these are just a few steps that can help any common error, writing error, and it is to basically change your mind from a mindset of the writer to a reader. That's step 1. Step 2 is to proofread backwards if you are unable to actually visibly see all of what you have written and clarity. If you just read and from beginning to end. Step 3 is circle down and just mark all your punctuations and ask yourself why you did this. And step 4 is to read and hear your sentences as you're reading, since as Berlin Klinkenberg says, the ears are much smarter than the eyes. And this just basically reiterates what I said in my second slide, so there's no need to read that. And now let's start with our examples. So my first example is in the restrictive abuse. And basically restrictive abuse is when you overuse the usage of a comma and you separate the essential part of a clause. So you separate a dependent clause with an independent clause, and the idea that you're formed in your writing, in your sentence. So my first example is actually from my first essay. Being unskilled with my thoughts has affected the way I write. And you're already probably questioning, well, how has affected the way I write an independent clause? There's no need of a comma, because the comma is basically saying that there's two independent clauses when there's really probably none. Also, you're not actually understanding how and why my unschooled thoughts are affected and what it is affecting, because actually there are two dependent clauses here, which creates a fragment. So the way I fixed this was by actually restructuring the whole sentence and trying to explain in a more explicit form how and why my writing is being affected through the inability of creating my own thoughts as I read a text. And so I go to the next slide. So I fix it by saying, by not practicing creating ideas of the text that I read, it has affected my writing. And there is no separation, because my inability to create ideas as I'm reading the text, or by not doing it, is what has affected my writing. So one leads to the other. If there's a restrictive element, there's a non-restrictive element, and this is what we call the comma sandwich. And this is what requires the 2 commas. So just to explain using an example, this is actually an example from my second essay, and it is, yellow can represent joy, and it was zoomed in 3 times. So you're probably thinking, well, there is no logical idea, because doesn't it all connect to the subject yellow? Well, no, because one is representing the color yellow and the other one is saying what is being done to the color yellow. So yellow represents joy, and yellow is being zoomed in 3 times. So 2 different things are being done. And so that's why there's a comma between yellow represents joy and was zoomed in 3 times. And although we were only supposed to write about 2 examples with the fixed answers, I also wanted to talk about introductory phrase, just because I do believe it is important, and it is quite easy of an error to fix. So the quote is, once I finished studying, I played basketball outside. And as you read it, you're probably like, well, how are you studying when you're playing outside? That is why the comma is so important, to represent the difference in time and action that is being conducted. So the sequence of events is actually that this person, or I, finished studying first, and then after they finished studying, they played basketball outside. So that comma is very much useful to separate the sequence of events of what had been done that led to what are you doing. And even though they're both being told in the past, you can still tell that one was done before the other. And so now it's your guys' turn, and I took out the slogan of our ELF Scholar slogan, you got this, because you guys got this. And so the example is, Anna gave cookies to the homeless, CHH, and empath. And a hint is my abuse to using commas. Is a comma needed? Is a comma not? Good luck, guys.